are no one. We are everyone. And we are invisible. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
We convinced ourselves that they were gone, but they were just hibernating.
Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
They came for everybody. All police.
Are we safe?
I guess we have ourselves a reckoning.
What are you two talking about?
Oh, nothing. Just the end of the world.
Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to go back and break down Watchmen, HBO's first trailer. There's been a slow drip of information coming out about Damon Lindelof's take on the iconic Watchmen series to this point, but I am expecting that we're going to get a lot more during the upcoming Comic-Con in San Diego this weekend. So this trailer is a couple months old, but for the sake of completeness, I wanted to break it down scene by scene because that's a thing I like to do. Before we begin, this will contain spoilers for the original Watchmen comic series / book. I made a video explaining why I think you should read it before you dive into the show if you haven't done that already, and I strongly recommend this. I'll put a link up top to that. It probably takes less than 8 hours to get through, and I think it's completely worth it. Watchmen on HBO probably won't premiere until October, so you do have time, and there's no real way to break down this trailer without spoiling the ending of the original Watchmen story. So this is the final warning. Now let's break down the trailer scene by scene. The trailer opens with a close-up shot of a man wearing a homemade mask that looks similar to the one the character Rorschach wears in the original comic. I use the word homemade because the original mask was made with a futuristic fabric where the black and white moved around under the surface but never mixed together. It's clear that the masks in the trailers aren't made of that, and therefore are likely a tribute to Rorschach, who died at the end of the comic. Before his death, he mailed his journal to a right-wing newspaper, and this opening sequence appears to indicate that it was eventually published. As the shot pans out, we see that there is a whole gang of people wearing Rorschach masks, and we hear the first voiceover. We are no one, we are everyone, and we are invisible. Behind the gang, which looks to be all men, we see a crucifixion that has the words of Psalm 65 above it. Praise waiteth for thee, O God, in Zion. We see that they're occupying an old church, and this verse definitely adds some cult-like vibes. The crucifixion is tilted, which could be a nod to a clock just past midnight. The next scene is of a pocket watch. The character who is holding it gives it a flick with his finger, and we see that the time is 9 minutes to midnight. After the flick, we hear a mantra-like repetition of the words tick-tock, tick-tock, and those carry on throughout most of the trailer. The original Watchmen book used repeated images of clocks counting down to midnight, so this seems like a nod to that. But in his letter to fans about the project, Lindelof said that the end of the world was off the table. I'll talk a little more about that in the discussion after we get through all the scenes. In the next shot, we see a new character, Chief Judd Nelson, addressing a room full of masked police officers. He says, "We convinced ourselves that they were gone, but they were just hibernating." The chief himself isn't wearing a mask, but it appears that all the other officers are when we scan the room. My guess is that his words refer to the Rorschachs over at the church, who we see again in the next scene. We watch them rolling out of a van and moving together as a group. They're armed, and we see one of them pump a shotgun as they go. The sequence is short, and there aren't a lot of visual clues as to where they are or who they're approaching. Chief Nelson's voiceover continues saying they came for everybody, all police. As he's speaking, we cut from the Rorschachs to a cemetery where a police funeral is taking place. It looks like most of the funeral goers are police officers, and they are all wearing their masks. We catch a quick glimpse of the American flag on the casket. We see that the stars are arranged in a circle, and that, coupled with the shot of the Washington Monument with the skywalk built around the top of it, serve as a reminder that even though the Watchmen universe resembles our world, that it is indeed an alternate reality. This brings to mind the cigarettes or the fast food being different in the graphic novel. Small hints that the world looks the same but is actually different. From there, we cut to the character Cal Abraham asking his wife Angela, "Are we safe?" And we see them embrace. This looks like a possible flashback to a time before the fighting between the Rorschachs and the police picked up. They look happy, and it cuts to a night shot of Angela looking intense in her car, which is obviously a contrast to the couple being together. Then we see her full costume in a locker, which looks like a callback to the comics when Rorschach discovers the comedian's costume, or like the Night Owl's locker in his workshop. It's not clear where she keeps her costume, but we see Angela don it in the next scene, and we notice that it includes her badge and that she wears a pair of beads around her waist. From there, we get a full shot of her mask at a crime scene, and a new voiceover cuts in. This sounds like the actor who plays the new character Looking Glass and says, "I guess we have ourselves a reckoning." This comes along with our first shot of Looking Glass, with his mask that looks like a wearable mirror, more or less. He appears to work for the police alongside Angela, and we'll get a better look at him in a minute. There's a quick shot of a truck driving away from a residence. Not much we can gather from this, but it looks like there are police stationed at the end of the drive as a protective measure. We get another glimpse of a new character named Special Agent Blake in the next scene. She appears to be looking at a laptop with a heavy-duty case. Blake is the last name of the comedian from the original story. That leaves us to guess that there's probably a family connection. The timing's weird though, since the story takes place 30 years after the original story. It's not exactly clear how these two could be related. Comedian was a member of the Minutemen in 1939, he died in 1985, and he would be pushing like 100 if he was still alive right now. The actress who plays Special Agent Blake is in her late 60s, so your guess is as good as mine. After that, there's a shot of a carnival with a bunch of people laying around on the ground like they dropped exactly where they were standing. I say laying around because they certainly could be dead, but there aren't any signs of violence. No blood, no smoke, no impact craters, just people on the ground. If you zoom in and look closely, there are some flames on a vehicle of some sort and a couple random people standing up looking around. Really can't say for sure what's going on here. There's a quick look at a kitchen timer that's going off with a loud ringing. Then we get our first look at the costume adventurer Ozymandias, aka Adrian Veidt, who is the one original character that we know is returning. He's meditating, which we've seen him do in the past. The last time we saw him do this, it was after he sent a giant squid to kill millions of people in New York City. He killed millions to save billions in his point of view, and this trailer could be hinting that he has another plan like that in mind. We see a foreign soldier looking fellow striking a match on his shoe. He looks like he would be a leader or an officer in the military of some unknown country. And by this time, the kitchen timer alarm and the Rorschach's TikToks are getting pretty intense. We see Angela in a camper attack an unknown character who isn't wearing a mask. It looks like the beads she wears on her waist are a weapon, and they look pretty effective as she strikes this guy. And that leads us into an action-packed sequence with a bunch of stuff going on. First, we see lights lit up around what looks like a farmhouse. There are cows, an old car in the yard, and some blazing lights inside the tree line. We see the chief shield his eyes, which means he might be on the scene witnessing this all go down. Then there's a cut to Ozymandias riding a horse past a pirate flag that is hanging from a scythe. This feels like a reference to the pirate comic inside the Watchmen comic called The Black Freighter, but that doesn't really explain why Adrian is riding a horse past it. We also see a shot of what I'm guessing is Ozzy/Adrian's castle from a distance, and those two shots are probably connected. Then we cut back to the farmhouse and see that the Rorschachs have brought the big guns, literally. They have what looks like a .50 caliber machine gun, which would be bad news for anyone it's pointed at, and they are unloading some bullets. We transition to some unfamiliar new characters looking up at the sky. One of them's holding a baby. This directly follows the machine gun scene, but they don't look like the targets based on the fact that they're not running for cover. After that, we see what looks like the Night Owl's airship Archie falling from the sky engulfed in flames. This is interesting on a lot of levels since there's been no mention of Night Owl or Silk Spectre in the casting we've seen so far, even though both characters could still be alive. The ship will apparently make an appearance even if the characters don't, but unfortunately it looks to be on the losing end of this conflict. There's another quick shot of Adrian Veidt pushing the plunger of a cartoon-style detonator. This could be related to the people we saw on the ground at the carnival, or it could be something else entirely. There's a quick shot of police firing a salute at the funeral that leads into a bizarre-looking sequence of looking glass surrounded by projection screens. The screens show images of cowboys, soldiers, and nuclear mushroom clouds. In his mask, we can see the reflection of someone, possibly Ozymandias, but there's no real way to tell, and there's no explanation for why he's sitting surrounded by these screens. Next, we get a look at another new character named Pirate Jenny. She's wearing a mask, cocking a rifle, and heading to the back of a prisoner transport truck. She looks to be working for the police, as do all the costume adventurers we see. Except for the Rorschachs, of course, and it cuts back to them as their TikTok chant climaxes. The background sounds stop and there's a final scene with the chief. We see that he's talking to someone off screen. A woman's voice asks what they're talking about and he replies, "Oh, nothing, just the end of the world." And with a wink and a smile, he adds, "Tick-tock, tick-tock," giving us a connection with the Rorschachs. The Watchmen HBO Season 1 trailer ends there, and it gives us a lot to speculate about. I mentioned that I would talk a little more about Damon Lindelof saying that the end of the world was off the table because I find that interesting. One of the things I liked about the original Watchmen story is that threat of nuclear destruction that's always looming in the background. For those of us who grew up in the 80s, this is a very real threat. Maybe not so much nowadays for people who are younger. Since he mentioned the end of the world is off the table, it makes you wonder what will be the current equivalent to that underlying threat. Since the Watchmen universe is an alternate version of our own world, it'll be really interesting to see how they use the events that happened at the end of the book in shaping the world that all these new characters live in. It brings up so many questions as well. If Rorschach's journal got out and is influencing the group of characters going to battle with the police, how is it that Adrian Veidt is living in a castle pushing plungers of what could be new doomsday devices? How come all the modern costume adventurers seem to not just be working with the police, but actually look a lot more like police officers first and foremost? How long did Richard Nixon remain president after securing his third term? What's up with Night Owl 2, Silk Spectre 2, and Dr. Manhattan? Are we going to see any of those characters in the HBO series? The possibilities are endless and it all amounts to something to get excited about. I love Damon Lindelof's last show, The Leftovers, and think this has a real chance of being a fantastic take on the time after a really great story that was the original Watchmen graphic novel. I think that Lindelof has shown that he has a real love and respect for the source material, and I'm really curious to see how he takes things into the future of this Watchmen universe. So let me know what you think. How is this universe different than ours? Is that Washington Monument actually in Washington? Because that doesn't really look like the National Mall to me. Will the Rorschachs be the big bad, or are they a stepping stone to get us into the bigger story that HBO is trying to tell? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what questions you have, what you're excited about, and any fears you have about a new story based in this hallowed ground of the Watchmen universe. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing plenty of Watchmen videos throughout the time leading up to season 1 and definitely all the way through. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.